Bill Gates is now the largest farmland owner in the United States. Why has Bill Gates become a kind of tech old MacDonald? Let's investigate it and work out, is he simply pursuing a plan to help people, or could there be another explanation?
Bill Gates has been snatching up 242,000 acres of farmland.
Snatching? Yeah, give me that.
Enough to make him the top private farmland owner in America.
With the video we made about the Indian protests and Vandana Shiva's comments about Bill Gates, there was such a positive response from all of you. Just one comment here, well actually this isn't a positive comment, it's a criticism. Dan I says, you didn't comment on Gates buying up half the farmland in the US. Now the reason was we didn't realise that's what you wanted us to do. Now we do know that. We will. Bill Gates is the fourth richest person in the world. He's been quietly buying up 200, I mean, I don't know if it's quietly or not, 242,000 acres of farmland across the US. The Land Report revealed that Gates has built up a massive farmland portfolio spanning 18 states. Gates is not the only billionaire on the Land Report's list of top private farmland owners. Wonderful company co-founders Stuart and Linda Rensing ranked number 3 with 190,000 acres. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos is also investing in land on a large scale with his ownership of 420,000 acres, mainly in West Texas. Just because billionaires are buying up farmland at a terrifying rate, it doesn't mean something suspicious has happened. When did you become so cynical?
Ranches and farms have become a huge asset class for the wealthy. If you look at the top 100 landowners in America, they now own 33 million acres. That's according to the Land Report 100. That's up 18% since 2008. And these top 100 landowners now own 2% of all the entire land mass in the United States.
Farmland has proven to be an attractive asset for professional investors with almost uniformly positive returns since the early 90s. A core theme for professional investors in farmland is supply versus demand and the associated asset stability produced by it. The amount of farmland in the US is shrinking at a rate of almost 3 acres per minute. However, the world's population is soaring past 7 billion. Food demand is growing and farmland and freshwater are increasingly becoming valuable resources. Here's some quotes that we see come up a lot in the comments. Henry Kissinger: control oil and you control nations, control food and you control people. Robert Kiyosaki: the rich don't work for money, they work for assets.
Bill Gates, for so long the world's richest man, who famously announced he would give most of it away and spend his time and vast resources on the world's poor. His foundation, worth more than $50 billion, run with his wife and investor Warren Buffett.
He's married to Warren Buffett? What's next? How much power do these guys need?
His wife and investor Warren Buffett has, with great success, targeted massive killers like malaria, TB and AIDS. Yet as Mr. Gates' powerful friends gather in Davos.
The idea that there's anything going on at Davos, it's just a bunch of guys and presidents and billionaires just meeting up, hanging out and just making inconsequential decisions.
The latest warning that the Gates Foundation has become too powerful and may not be the force for good so many world leaders say it is.
What else does Bill Gates invest in? Gates also has investment in GMO crops, seed patents, synthetic foods, artificial intelligence, including robotic farm workers, and commanding positions in Coca-Cola, Unilever, Philip Morris, Kraft, General Foods, Kellogg's, Procter & Gamble and Amazon, and in multinationals like Monsanto, Bayer that market chemical pesticides and petrochemical fertilizers. Gates also has massive stakes in the oil majors Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips and Shell. He owns the world's largest private jet company and his investments in coal-generating fleets, including the Canadian National Railway and CSX Richmond.
The study from the pressure group Global Justice Now paints a picture of the Gates Foundation, partly as an expression of corporate America's desire to profit from Africa, and partly a damning critique of its effects.
I'm not here to judge Bill Gates as a human being, but it does seem like an awful lot of power for one individual to wield. It also concerns me that anybody can bias the direction of the fate of a planet so strongly and is able to own green energies, fossil energies, farmland, patented seed foods, particularly when you look at the Indian farm protests and the unrest that that's causing, and particularly with some of Bill Gates's experiences in African farming, which we'll come to in a minute.
Among the many criticisms, the idea that private finance can solve the problems of the developing world. Should poor farmers be trapped into debt by having to use chemicals or fertilizers underwritten by offshoots of the foundation.
This is Bill Gates' side of the conversation. He says he wants to revive farm economies by transforming agriculture with super efficient high-tech AI to create the farms of the future. He says, we used to all have to go out and farm. We barely got enough food. When the weather was bad, people would starve. Now, through better seeds, fertilizer, lots of things, most people are not farmers. And so AI will bring us immense new productivity.
I think agricultural productivity is one of the most basic things that can help the poor move to a more prosperous life.
Vandana Shiva, my new hero, warns American farmers already drowning in debt to be very wary of Gates' promise to throw them a line. When Bill Gates forced his rescue technologies on Indian farmers, the only one to benefit was Bill Gates and his multinational partners. He gave money to the government and a company called Digital Green and made extravagant promises to digitally transform Indian agriculture, then with the cooperation of his purchased government officials.
There was a green revolution based on new seeds, and it raised nutrition levels, it reduced poverty. It was one of the great breakthroughs of all time. Now we need to bring that advance to Africa.
Well, let's see how that worked out. In the year 2000, Bill and Melinda Gates launched the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, promising to double crop productivity and boost incomes for 30 million small farms by 2020 while cutting food insecurity in half.
There's no doubt that a combination of better seeds and better inputs, including fertilizer, can raise African agricultural productivity.
A 2020 study, The False Promises, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, concluded that the number of Africans suffering extreme hunger increased by 30% in the 18 countries that Gates targeted. Rural poverty has metastasized dramatically, and the number of hungry people in these countries has risen to 131 million.
There's tons of ways that digital technology helps farmers. The cell phone is really kind of unbelievable in, market prices, what's working, what's going on with the weather.
What happened when cell phones were distributed among Indian farmers? Bill Gates put cameras and electronic sensors in the homes and fields of Indian farmers. He used their cell phones, which he gave them for free, and his fibre optics and 5G installations, which he persuaded Indian telecom company to finance, to catalogue, study and steal farmers' crop data, indigenous practices and agricultural knowledge for free. Then he sold it back to them as new data. Instead of digitally transforming farms as he promised, he transformed Indian farmers into digital information. He privatised their seeds and harvested the work of the public system. He ripped out their knowledge assets and heirloom genetics and installed GMO seeds and other ridiculous practices. Shiva adds his clear agenda was to drive small farmers from the land and eventually mechanise and privatise food production. I don't really believe in nefariousness, wickedness or evil. I believe that we all operate as nodes within systems, that any individual is capable of selfishness and greed. I know I have been in my own life, and I require systems that encourage the better aspects of my nature. Kindness, compassion, service. If I find myself operating within those systems, I become a better person. When I enter into the modes, modalities and ideologies of capitalism, I feel my own greed, my own selfishness surging. So I believe that many of these technologies may not necessarily be problematic if they were solely put to the service of the people on the front line, ordinary farmers, ordinary people. But as long as they are galvanized and mobilized to garner profit and power for a select group, the results are always going to be the same. Having said that, I'm pretty cynical and skeptical about a lot of that GM crop stuff. It sounds frightening, the kind of reports that you hear anecdotally.
It's not clear how Gates' farmland is being used or whether any of the land is being set aside for conservation. This is not Gates' only foray into agriculture. The foundation also invested in the development of supercrops resistant to climate change and higher yield dairy cows.
We had some comments from some of you that are farmers. Chase Autry says, I actually farm up in North Texas. We mostly grow cotton in this area. When Vandana Shiva talks about taking control of seeds, it reminds me of Roundup Ready cotton. It started off as great, but now plants are starting to get resistant. You can't collect your seed for next season, forcing you to buy new seeds every year. Seed prices are increasing at an alarming rate. Julie Selden says, I'm a farmer in the US. I buy non-GMO seeds and plant them. Should a bee land on a GMO plant and then land on my plant, it will cause my plant to produce GMO fruits and vegetables. Since I did not pay for a GMO seed, if they find my plants at GMO Monsanto, they can sue me, taking everything I have. However, I can't sue them for when my crop turns GMO. These people are pure evil. Those are your Words Julie Selden, not mine. Scott Cole says, I live in Lancaster, PA. I'm surrounded by Amish and organic farms. None of these things are happening here, hence the reliance on local food sources is paramount. I don't think any of us quibble with the idea that technology can help us, can improve our lives. That's observably true in almost every area of life. What's problematic is the invisible ideology behind these technologies that says that the power behind them has to be centralized and that the profits and benefits yielded by these technologies all run in the direction of a small group of institutions and a small group of individuals. This is where the problems seem to start. Localization versus centralization seems like a key and important idea, and when power is concentrated in the hands of a few individuals, whether that's under a capitalist system or colonialism, it leads to exploitation and problems. The way that data can be accrued now, mobilized and utilized now, sort of seems to be creating godlike figures on earth, making decisions and plans that are beyond the scope of ordinary humanity. Don't you feel that we should be, as best as possible with the use of technology and the information that we now have, emulating the conditions for which we are evolved? Small, self-sufficient communities trading when necessary.
All these decisions about what to plant, what are the prices, what are the diseases, you take a photo of something and some expert looks at it and says, okay, that doesn't have enough potassium or enough nitrogen. That's mostly in the future, but that's real stuff. It's mind-blowing.
This ideology, whether well-intentioned or not, whether the intention is to help people or to accrue more centralized power for the organizations that already wield so much, it seems that the results are negative for many, many ordinary people. I can see why lots of you might think that to continue in this direction could be detrimental for the planet and could indeed be dangerous. And I'm sure many of you are hungry for alternatives, different ways of organising power, ways that ordinary people can have control over their own lives, control over their own resources, and that there should be some regulation on this kind of behaviour. Some kind of regulation at a state level, at a global level. But what force, what institution is powerful enough to oppose this degree, this ability to impose will? Where do you see it? Can countries do it? No, countries aren't powerful enough. Can organisations such as the IMF, World Trade Organization, World Health Organization, where do they get their funding from? Where do they get their legitimacy from? What kind of relationships do they have? The only possible resource is the power that we have collectively. Unless we have different ways of organising, unionising and pursuing our goals, there is no alternative. We've seen what's happened in Africa, we see what's going on in India, and we have a sense of what's happening in the countries that I'm assuming that, I know where I live, but I'm assuming where you live as well. Without some concerted effort, without some new ideology, which I believe will be based on localism, the sharing of resources, the acceptance that each group is autonomous, and whether you're on the left or the right, religious or non-religious, however you identify, communities must be allowed to run themselves, control their own resources, act democratically within the limitations of certain universal laws around respect for one another and respect for our resources and the planet in general. Without significant change towards true democracy, the consequences are becoming quite clear.
You could have a case where the initial research is done by a Gates-funded institution. The media reporting on how well that research is conducted is done. The media outlet is a Gates-funded outlet and maybe a Gates-funded journalist from a media programme, and then the programme is implemented more widely by a Gates-funded NGO. I mean, there are some very insular circles here.
Bill Gates has giant stakes in Google, Apple, Amazon and Facebook, and has given $250 million in grants to media outlets including NBC, Universal, the BBC, NPR, Le Monde and The Guardian. Grants, that sounds like donations and providing funding. You know that the mainstream media is in urgent and desperate need of funding, and I wonder what kind of coverage they will afford to people that make such significant donations, and you can decide for yourself whether or not that would likely bias the kind of reporting that would take place.
Critics of Mr. Gates ask whether it's right that one foundation with more money than entire African countries should wield so much power and influence.
Probably no one in the world is better positioned than Bill Gates to create a real positive difference. I sincerely hope that is the intention of Bill Gates, because with those resources, that amount of power, that amount of farmland, that amount of influence over the media, that much assets in the tech world, in the oil and energy industry world, there is considerable influence and certainly power to change things. So we better pray that Bill Gates' intentions are good. If you enjoyed that video, please like, subscribe and share. It really helps us when you do that. And also sign up for my community. Go to russellbrand.com and sign up now. Thank you very much.